Hello there, and welcome to BioEpic, the podcast that delves into people's lives and their impact on our world. My name is Crystal Downey, and I'm here with my colleagues in the library service, Claudia Jessup and Jackie Hastick. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
So October marks Black History Month, and as part of our events celebrating this, today we are discussing the extraordinary life of Claudia Jones. So welcome everybody, and let's kick off. So Claudia and Jackie, it's good to be sharing this podcast with yourselves and talking about who we believe is a real trailblazer. So can you tell us about Claudia Jones's early life and how she came to be associated with our borough? Like, what was her origin story?
Okay, well, thanks, Crystal. Because this podcast, we wanted to kind of delve into our biography collection at Kensington Central Library, and we started with a biography of Claudia Jones called A Life in Exile, which was published in 1999 by Lawrence and Wishart, and it's kind of it's quite an old book, but it's actually a really good introduction to her life and has also some personal reminiscences of people who knew her. And from that book we learned that she was born in Trinidad in 1915, and when she was about 8 or so years old, her family emigrated to the United States and they settled in Harlem. And she unfortunately suffered from ill health all her life and dropped out of high school when she was quite young. But even from that age, she got very involved in politics. She got very involved in the Communist Party, and she was part of was it called the Young Communist League, Jackie?
The Young Communist League.
And so she was very interested in all of that from a young age. To cut a long story short, that put her on the kind of wrong side of the law, because at that time it was a crime to actually be a communist. I mean, it wasn't that she did any criminal activities. It was simply her communist beliefs. She was eventually prosecuted for, and she was imprisoned. Her ill health affected her badly in prison, and in fact there was a big campaign for her to be released early because people were worried that she wouldn't survive that incarceration. And then after that she was deported, and she was not allowed to return to Trinidad. And instead she had to come to London, where she arrived. You know, she didn't know anybody in London, and she was by herself. And although she never actually lived in this borough, she has a really incredibly important role in the history of this borough, because the thing that we remember her most for here is the fact that she started the Notting Hill Carnival. She was the original person who had the idea of doing that, and it was really it was part of a kind of passionate dedication that she had to the causes that she supported. So that's what makes her a particularly interesting person for us here.
I fully understand. I mean, she's a woman that's been called lots of different things: trailblazer, feminist. She was sort of a political activist, community leader. It sounds like she wore a lot of hats. So in terms of, and what I also found interesting actually is hearing about her suffering from ill health. So apparently she did have tuberculosis as a child, and the damage to her lungs as well as severe heart disease plagued Claudia for the rest of her life. She also had to drop out of high school due to poverty. So how do you think that affected her spirit, like emotionally? Did it contribute to her drive and determination?
Okay. Hi, Crystal. I believe through reading the book that her drive and determination came from primarily the many hats that she wore, but also it was a passion. These are things that she was also passionate about. Mm-hmm. And maybe in the back of her mind, because she was so ill, she wanted to leave a legacy. And that might have been her drive, because she was helping her own people, and there were so many things to do within that. So I think that would have been the main force behind her.
Brilliant. And so what do you think were Claudia Jones's reasons for starting the West Indian Gazette newspaper? and then like the Notting Hill Carnival, what were some of the things she was responding to?
Again, in the book and in articles I've read, she said that lambs without people without a voice were lambs to slaughter. And she just wanted a platform for her people to be heard. So the paper was one way of her doing that. And I think it was a case of being, by them, for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a representation of drawing all these cultures, because the Caribbean is many islands, and it was a way of having like a common interest in a way. Carnival, I think, very much the same thing. It was to unify people and give them a piece of home, because a lot of people came here via Windrush or other means, but it was all for the same reason. And I would imagine a lot of them missed being home, being in a place that was foreign to them. So having Carnival was something that would remind them of what they had left, but in a joyous way.
Definitely. And a people's art is the genesis of their freedom. That was the original slogan of the Notting Hill Carnival, which she did help to launch in 1959. And it started as an annual showcase for Caribbean talent. But not many people know that these early celebrations were held in halls to begin with, before famously moving outside. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's right. And in fact, there's a lovely bit in the book where it talks about how she contacted the director of Kew Gardens to get palm trees to decorate. I think St Pancras Town Hall was one place they had it, and then I think Seymour Hall, which I believe is kind of in the Marble Arch area. Anyway, and she wanted, I think that really shows, that little piece of information shows her attention to detail, and also the fact that she went straight to the director of Kew Gardens and just said, we want to borrow some palm trees to make this, to give it the atmosphere, even though they were indoors in these halls. So yeah,
a really inspirational woman. And Claudia and Jackie, you both grew up in the area. So does Claudia Jones's story speak to you of how you've experienced life in the borough?
I wasn't actually born or brought up in the borough. I was brought up on just a little way from there. I'm mostly like Fulham. Okay. But the carnival, I have a lot of fond memories of. I've been going to carnival since I was a young child, with my parents, and that sense of community was so different from where I lived. So if that was Claudia's goal, which I think it was, she fully realised it, because I don't think we'd ever seen anything like that. And for it to be in Notting Hill, in Ladbroke Grove, where it has a huge, a history of people coming over from the Caribbean and settling, was huge. So the more you look into it, you can see the strands joined, really, of where it began and what it has built up to. And you can see, without even knowing, once you know and you hear about her, then everything starts to make complete sense.
Definitely. And I had the pleasure of working on Carnival 2020, and obviously due to this pandemic, we were encouraged to take Carnival off the streets and virtual for the first time in its 54-year history. So I think Kensington and Chelsea as a borough was really keen to have Carnival in some form rather than nothing at all. So, it was really exciting to see how the team were able to capture content of the sound systems, masks, the costumes, still bands, and able to pre-record it and have it streaming throughout the weekend to encourage people to enjoy it from the safety of their own home. So I think she'd be proud almost to see how Carnival has still succeeded and developed to meet modern day obstacles, really.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think there's another quite touching little bit in the book where she refers to one of the either the first or the second maybe carnival, and she says, we would like to think about doing this every year, and it's her hope at that time. And you think, gosh, if she knew that, it went on for all these decades and it's world famous, and it just means such a lot to people.
Definitely. So what were you surprised to have learned about her? Or what sense, did you get from, what sense did you get from the book of what kind of woman she was as an individual?
I think she was a very, very determined woman, very determined, considering the hurdles she had to get over, apart from beyond the fact of being Black and a woman and not in the best of health. She managed to get over all of that, use that as her strength, and just was able to achieve so much. And it was, even when you think about it, you just think how, a healthy person, they would be really stretched to be able to do half of what she accomplished. And I just think that strength of character was just amazing. That was the thing that really touched me.
Yeah, same here. She was just absolutely incredible, what she achieved. And also, again, it's nice the kind of the personal reminiscences in the book that she was obviously someone who was really, really loved on a personal level by her friends and people, as well as being an incredible activist. Because some of the people describe, they were quite intimidated when they first met her, because she was this big, really serious intellectual woman, and she'd done, she was quite a kind of a figure that you might think, oh gosh, she'll be a bit very, very serious but in fact she was obviously really good company and really, a really joyful kind of person to have as a friend. And so that gives you that real sense of her as a woman, doesn't it, Jackie? I think
that she was so rounded, and that she could just wear, like I said, just so many hats, so many facets to her personality, and just to be able to really it's just mind-blowing.
So it sounds like she was a really complex woman with, different strands, many strands to her bow. So already that's an interesting story there. But what interested you about the way the book was written about her?
I think it was written quite sympathetically as well.
Yes.
It was quite sympathetic. It was very respectful. It was, and you got a sense of her in that book. For a beginner like me who I didn't really know a lot about her at all, that book was reading the book and reading about her, I got a lot out of it. I think most questions were answered because of the way it was written. And then you've got the personal inflections at the back from people that actually knew her. So I think it was a really good book and a really good introduction to Claudia Jones.
And on that note as well, it's probably worthwhile us sort of listing the name and author of the book.
Yes, so it's called Claudia Jones, A Life in Exile, which is interesting in itself because, it's talking about the period when she had been deported and all the, her new projects that she did with a new kind of life that she was really forced upon her. And it's by Marika Sherwood, and it was published in 1999 by Lawrence and Wishart. And while we mention that, we should say that, the biography collection at Kensington Central Library. It's about 90,000 books, and if you want to look up anything on our catalogue, you can put the surname of the person you're interested in the subject space, and you can email us, which is libraries@rbkc.gov.uk, and ask for us to look for biographies for you about people that you're interested in.
Brilliant. That's really important to know, actually, the fact that you've got 90,000 stories on there. That's a lot of life.
It is. It definitely is.
So historically in the UK, we've had the Voice newspaper for the Afro-Caribbean community, and we've also had New Nation, which unfortunately folded in the late 90s, early 2000s. And since then, it's really been quite bleak in terms of major Afro-Caribbean media houses. So how important do you think it was to have established a working newspaper for so many years for the Afro-Caribbean community as a whole? That was pretty trailblazing, right?
Definitely. Like I said, anybody from any community likes to read or see something that is representational of themselves. And that was a brilliant way of doing that and getting across to so many as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like she said, it's to give her people a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she basically managed to do that. So it's extremely important that we have something representative of our cultures, of our people.
Yeah. And that I think that was also the case with we were talking the other day, weren't we, Jackie, about the beauty pageant that she started with the carnivals. She had the Carnival Queens, and obviously beauty pageant, sort of feminist point of view and all of that. It might be a tricky sort of thing, but that was a really important reason why she did that. I don't know if you want to say more, Jackie, about that.
Again, it's self-image. It's self-discovery. It's just that you're as beautiful, because if you've been heard anything but that, then to have something like that, I think it was mainly to just give ourselves some pride. Also, I said to Claudia, I remember, because I'm that old, when Miss Grenada won the world's Miss World, and my parents are Grenadian. And I remember
that I can imagine was a party that night in your house.
Yeah, it was. I remember them jumping on chairs. And I was a bit at a loss, and then I realised what it was. And the pride that my parents had, and they'd been here for a few years. And the pride that they had, it was, from that. So I could imagine, just having these outlets, which, nowadays we would not be quite so keen on, but I think then just for the message behind it, I think that would be irreplaceable, really.
And I think that was really typified her as a woman, didn't it? That she just wanted to do something that would show and show the, the white community that, as we know, had not been very welcoming often, and to say this is the culture that we have, that people had in the Caribbean, and this is all the incredible. She used to get really the top musicians and people, didn't she? For the early carnivals, she had all the really big names in calypso music and everything, and she was just putting it all out there. Yeah.
I definitely do think it's important, because there has been the argument that being a minority, you sometimes are presented with just the mainstream version of beauty, which if it's at odds to your natural appearance or your natural ethnic features, it can be difficult. So I think the fact that she recognised that so long ago is sort of testament to the visionary that she was, because she realised that we need to be represented. We need to have the children see this is where we came from, and it's not just, you know, Caribbean history is more than just slavery. It's, you know, expression, it's triumph, it's you know, making something out of adversity. And it's not always struggling, because in the Caribbean, you know, it's not always poverty stricken. And I think she was able to let people know that the Caribbean has more of a positive, there's a positive reflection that can be had from it, whereas, you know, a lot of people might not have seen that being in the UK. So, I mean, it's she was cited, Claudia Jones, in the 100 Great Black Britons list quite recently. Do you think Claudia was given the recognition she deserved during her lifetime?
Right, from my perspective, I didn't know anything about her.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that by us doing a broadcast like this, to however many people may listen to it, it will open their eyes to her and her contribution to London, basically, if not just Ladbroke Grove. And people will be curious to find out more about her. Yeah, I mean, that's the best way I can answer that at this moment.
Definitely. Claudia, do you have any thoughts?
Well, yes. I mean, I hadn't heard of her other than I was saying to Jackie, there's an organisation where I live in Hackney, which is called the Claudia Jones Organisation. I think it's a support organisation for Black women and families, and it was only by walking past over, you know, years, some time ago, and I just used to occasionally think, oh, I wonder who Claudia Jones is or was, or who she, you know, but I didn't know anything about her, and I think maybe in recent years, I think there are some scholars in America and people who've written much more about her life, but it would be great if, you know, if there was, I don't know, if there was a big statue of her in Ladbroke Grove. So that might be a bit, you know, but just so that people could, you know, because she did something amongst all the other things she did something so that's had, you know, in the shape of the carnival, that's just had such a massive impact, you know.
Definitely. And so Claudia died around Christmas 1964. What do we know? I mean, did the book sort of talk about the latter part of her life or her death? You know, can you tell us any more about her life at that point?
I think, you know, her life was very hard in the sense that, you know, money was never in a good supply. She was always, and it seems, I don't know if you agree, Jackie, that, you know, she just worked right up until the end doing, you know, she was what we'd call now a workaholic. I mean, she was absolutely just involved in all these things all the time. And her health was not good at all. And so eventually I think her body just, you know, sort of couldn't sustain it any longer. And I think I don't know, the sense I got was that the latter part of her life was very, you know, very, very demanding, but full of people who were, you know, devoted to her and full of achievement, full of just, you know, triumphs and doing things that people couldn't have imagined that somebody would have been able to do in the, you know, sadly short amount of time that she had.
Well, it's very interesting. And obviously, so just to repeat the name on the title of the book so that anyone that is listening can sort of make a note.
Yeah, so the author is called Marika Sherwood, Sherwood, and it's Claudia Jones, A Life in Exile.
Brilliant. Sounds really intriguing. And obviously, we are kicking off Black History Month with the spotlight on Claudia Jones's story, but I'm assuming there are other stories about BAME individuals, characters in your collection.
Yes, I mean, there's actually it's a really good place for that, because in fact there are lots of people who some leading figures, that everything that we have about them biographically, or practically all of it, is in that collection, particularly people from maybe longer ago. So, for example, we did a display a year or two ago about civil rights activists, and there was a huge number of books I was really kind of delighted to find, and some of them are quite rare. People like, obviously, Martin Luther King, to be a person that, you know, a lot of people obviously would have heard of. We've got lots on him, and some of it's really quite rare books from the 60s, you know, so yeah, so it's a fantastic resource.
Brilliant. And how do people ask for books then?
So they can look up on our catalogue on our website, the RBKC Libraries catalogue, and you can narrow down your search filter so that you put biography store collection, and that will show what's in that collection specifically. But the easiest thing might be that you can just put the name of the person that you're looking for under the subject. So when you've got, you know, title, author, etc., you can put it under the subject heading, and everything will come up. Some of which will be, you know, we have biographies on our normal lending floor as well, but we've got this enormous collection down there. And at the moment, you can email us at libraries@rbkc.gov.uk, and we're having collections twice a day, at midday and 5 o'clock and 4 o'clock on a Saturday, where we're bringing up books, because the collection is not, the public can't browse it, and we're bringing books up so that people can come and collect them, and you could just come into the library as well and talk to one of us, and we'll, you know, see what we can find from that collection for you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today, Claudia and Jackie. As we mentioned, we have over 90,000 biographies, autobiographies available in our library. So anyone that's listening, do get in contact. And yeah, join us on the next episode of the BioEpic podcast. We hope to see you there.